Let's Talk with Keith Spera is underwritten by the New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Foundation.
Hello, I'm Keith Spera from NOLA.com and the Times-Picayune. Welcome to Let's Talk. My guest today grew up in the Ninth Ward. Since then, her powerhouse voice has taken her to stages around the world. She has toured or recorded with the likes of Sting, John Fogerty, and Alan Toussaint, and spent 5 years as the featured vocalist in the band Galactic. Since 2019, she has focused on her own band, the aptly named Vintage Soul, which specializes in R&B and soul that sounds both classic and contemporary at the same time. Her new album, a very good album, is called Emotions. Here to talk about all that and more is Erica Falls. Erica, welcome to Let's Talk.
Hi, how are you?
I'm well. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
I had the pleasure of seeing you perform at the recently reopened Dewdrop Inn recently. Mm-hmm. Sounded great. Band sounded great. You wore a sparkly silver dress and bedroom slippers, it looked like.
At the end of the night, it was time to take those heels off.
So you didn't have them on the whole time?
No, I came out cute.
See, and I was in the back, so I couldn't see your feet.
Okay.
So I couldn't see your feet, but when I worked my way up to the front, that's when I saw the slippers. So obviously I got there post high heels then, I guess.
Yes.
Post high heels, all right. Is that a habit of yours? You always bring back up
I do. It's a running bet on how long I'm going to keep them on. So maybe by the third song, maybe by the fifth song, maybe by the seventh song. So.
Have you ever made a whole show with the?
I have.
All right.
I have.
All right. All right. Did you wear them at Jazz Fest when you play at Jazz Fest? Did you put the slippers on?
No, I was barefoot in the rain.
Barefoot in the rain. Most recent one you were barefoot?
Most recent one I was in the rain.
Barefoot in the rain.
Yes.
All right. All right. Well, did you, playing at the Dewdrop that night, I mean, did you have a sense of history there? I mean, did it seem like a heavy kind of gig? Because obviously every New Orleans rhythm and blues great back in the day, in the 50s and 60s, performed there. The place had been abandoned for many years, just reopened after a $6 million renovation. Irma Thomas played there the weekend before you did.
Yes.
So what was your vibe playing there that night?
So, just to back it up a little bit, I had the pleasure of being in there for a round table before everything was put into place. And the energy was so strong when I walked into that place. And it's still the same. Even with all the, the modern chairs and everything else that's in there that makes it so beautiful now, the energy in history, you can feel it, you can cut it with a knife.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. And I was struck by the fact that your band that night, you and your band, I think, if the Dewdrop had continued from the past to the present with the same vibe, you guys sounded exactly like a band playing at the Dewdrop would sound like. I mean, you had those references to kind of classic R&B and soul, but it still feels contemporary, like I said in the intro. But you sounded like a band that would have been back in the Dewdrop back in the day, if back in the day was today, if that makes any sense.
Wow, yeah, that's a great compliment.
That's what hit me. I was like, it's like I'm being time transported back.
Wow,
so.
Thank you.
Yeah, no. And that's kind of your approach, though. I mean, you were in touch with the past, but you want it to be present.
Yes, and really it's just a part of who I am. I like all old things and making them new. I go to a thrift store and I, get a piece of furniture and reupholster it and make it modern. So it's just what I love to do, and it translates into my music as well, my writing.
Absolutely, absolutely. You can tell. And you grew up, as I said in the intro, you grew up in the Ninth Ward, and you were exposed to a lot of classic music as a kid via your parents, I guess, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so who is it? Roberta Flack? What kind of stuff were you hearing back in the day?
Oh man, so much stuff, because I'm the youngest of, it was 5 of us in the home, so I'm the baby, and so I heard everything from Mahalia Jackson to Dottie Peoples to Ray Charles to Duke Ellington, Sarah Vaughan. My dad loved Sarah Vaughan. And then it went to the Sugar Hill Gang and Roberta Flack and Shalimar and the Ohio Players, Anita Baker, so Sade. So it was just such a vast mix of music that I heard throughout throughout the house all the time. Carole King, you know, all that good stuff.
Were you listening to the kind of local R&B too? I mean, were your parents into the local stuff as well?
Yes, my dad was an avid listener to WWOZ. And so I remember there was a song on and I wanted to know who it was. He said, well, call them. They'll answer the phone and they'll tell you. And so I did. I remember sitting at the kitchen table and it was a song by Billy Eckstine. I was like, okay. So that was my introduction to OZ.
Wow, well, to the formative years, it went all the way back. It went all the way back. What was it that gave you an inkling that you could be a singer yourself? Was there a watershed moment in grade school, or was there a eureka moment where you're like, hey, I can do this?
Well, coming up, my mother was a phenomenal singer and classically trained pianist. And hearing her sing in the house, I was like, you know what, I'm gonna do something else because she has that department covered. But it wasn't until, and I played piano and violin up until high school. When I got into high school, that's when I really found my voice. And that's when I fell in love with it and said, maybe I could do this. I was still a little shy though, but I forged forward.
Having seen you on stage numerous times, I cannot imagine you being shy at any point in your life under any circumstances, but it happens.
I am an introvert, so. It's hard for people to believe sometimes, but I am.
But you know, that's funny because you know, you're not the first performer to say that. You know, in my off-stage life, my normal life, I'm very shy and quiet, but the stage then is your opportunity. It flips that switch.
Yes.
Right? I mean, is that,
It allows my alter ego, Caroline, to come out.
Caroline?
Yes.
I did not know it had a name.
It has a name.
Tell me about Caroline.
Well, Caroline came to be because I I had the lead singing part in Lee Daniels' The Butler, the movie. And in the scene, the minister turned to me and said, hey, Caroline, why don't you take us back into that song? And so my cousin continued that. And he'd be in the audience and I hear him from the audience saying, get it, Caroline. So it just stuck. I was like, that's her name, Caroline.
That's great. That's great. A lasting legacy of that movie. That's the souvenir you took with you from that movie.
I did.
And obviously, we're in New Orleans, have to ask, where did you go to high school?
I graduated from Francis T. Nichols.
Francis T. Nichols?
Yes, but I started out at McDonough 35, so my high school years were split. Yeah.
Okay, all right, all right. If you're just tuning in, my guest today is singer Erica Falls. Erica, we talked about classic New Orleans rhythm and blues. You spent some time working with one of the greats of New Orleans music, Mr. Allen Toussaint.
Yes.
Was that, had to be an intense learning experience in some regards?
Well, when I get around people like Alan or Dr. John or Irma, I'm pretty much quiet because at that point I become a sponge.
A sponge.
And I just want to absorb what's happening. And I just paid attention to him and his songwriting, how he conducted his rehearsals, how he wanted your input. He would always ask, well, how did you feel about that? Did you feel good? You know, it wasn't just like, you do what I say. But he was also particular of what he wanted, and he knew how to get it from you as well. So it was a great experience working with him, a great learning experience.
And he would have you do, what were the big songs that you were showcased on?
What's the one with the Pointer Sisters? Oh gosh, I can't think of the title.
Yes, I know what you're talking about.
You know the song I'm talking about?
Yes, I know the song.
I did a feature with him on that, and we also worked on Southern Nights, of course. So many of the other ones that we did with him live and in the studio as well. Yeah.
No, I mean, I mean, that's a guy that wrote the New Orleans songbook, basically.
Yes.
So there is no one better to intern with. And I referenced it in the intro. You worked with Sting briefly. What was the story
So
there?
with the year that one of the years that New Orleans hosted the Super Bowl, they had this live Friday night show, and so this group I was singing with at the time, ELS, they hired us a lot to do session work up at Ultrasonic Studios with Dave Farrell, and he was the one that referred us. And so it was for that show we got to do background vocals with Sting. And we met Martina McBride and No Doubt and a whole bunch of really cool people at that time. So that's how that happened.
No, that's great. It's a great experience. And then John Fogerty, you were on one of his records?
So we did a session with him where he did a remake of Proud Mary, and Jennifer Hudson was the lead vocalist. And Alan actually produced the session. So it was so many people that was in there, Rockin' Doopsie, Rebirth, myself and the girls ELS, and oh gosh, so many other people. And Jennifer came in. And so that's how I met her, and that's how I ended up working with John Fogerty on this project.
That's awesome. I mean, and yet, you know, for someone who is working her way up in the ranks like you were, to cross paths with people that have such a history and so much success, that's a good thing to kind of touch base with them and see how they operate and see how they do it. It's very useful for you, I'd imagine.
Yes, you can learn a lot just paying attention to how people operate and how they do what they do, and you can just glean from it for yourself and use what works for you.
You spent almost 5 years with Galactic.
The boys.
The boys. You know, I've heard some of the stories. There was very much a brother-sister relationship, it sounds like, with those guys.
Yeah. It was, you know, I learned so much from them. It was a great run. And, you know, I called the tour bus a little tiny house on wheels. And you have to like each other to be in that space and spend so much time in that space, you know. And when I started with them, they didn't know much about me, and I didn't know much about them. But, you know, we learned, and friendships grew. And so I always say, people would always say, did they fuss on the bus? I was like, yeah, about what restaurant sold the best pizza or the best steak or the best weird food, whatever they ate. Other than that, it was all love.
Now, did you have to like put your name on stuff in the refrigerator so nobody would take care of your food?
I did. So I had a little slogan that said, touch, get cut.
Right? Touch, get cut.
Yes, and we ended up writing a song about it. It was a different story in the song, but we used that title, Touch, Get Cut, yeah.
So your note on the food and the leftovers inspired the title of that song.
Exactly.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, so you made the decision to leave Galactic, and it was a great gig, obviously. I mean, you toured a lot, made good money, I'm sure, but you wanted to focus on your own deal.
Yeah.
So you take the plunge, 2019, you jump out on your own, and then the world shuts down a few months later in 2020. So tell me what was going through your brain at that point.
Oh my gosh. Well, first off, survival mode kicked in.
Survival mode, yep.
Music, singing, everything sort of went out the window, and I was focused on, okay, my mortgage is still gonna need to be paid, my electric bill, utilities, all of that stuff. And so I focused on that at first. But then when it became too unsafe to go outside, it forced me to be inside. And as I mentioned on the record, I was listening to WWOZ Festing in Place, and they played my set from 2019 Jazz Fest. And I wept because then I remembered, this is what I do. This is where my sanity lies, right? So that's when I started to dig deep, and I started to write, you know, everything that I was feeling, that I was absorbing, that I was seeing on the TV. And that's how Emotions came about. The
album, the new album.
Yeah.
And for those who don't know, the Festing in Place, when Jazz Fest was canceled those 2 years in 2020 and 2021, WWOZ played classic sets.
Yes.
Recorded at previous festivals during the time that the festival would have been going on.
Yes.
So did you know that they were going to play one of your sets, or did you just happen to hear it?
I didn't know. They had a little schedule they would put out, and I happened to look at the schedule that day. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to take a listen. I can, you know, maybe fix some stuff. You know, I was going into critique, but it hit me in a whole nother way.
Wow. Just kind of, but it was a good thing for you.
Yeah,
it was a cleansing thing. Yes.
It was, yeah.
If you're just tuning in, my guest today is singer Erica Falls. So at that point, you started writing the stuff that ended up on the new record, Emotions. And if you look at some of the titles, you've got Frustration, Exasperated, Over It. Are you okay?
I am good now.
Okay.
But I drank a lot of wine during that lockdown.
Well, yeah, no, obviously, I mean, because all those emotions came into play for everybody, and those couple of those tracks that are on the record are spoken word recordings of you. I don't know, is that you just riffing to friends?
Actually, I cooked dinner, and I had my girlfriends and my brother and some other folks over, and we just talked about different topics about, you know, that was on the record, and I just used some clips from it to kind of express what I was feeling and give some insight into the next song that was happening. Right.
And you've got a lot of happy songs on there as well.
Of course. You need the release.
You need the release. Actually, and I love the story. There was a melody for one of the songs, I think, that came to you while you were riding on a boat on a lake in Switzerland.
Yes, Good Times.
Good Times.
Yes.
Which, hearing the story about writing a song while on a boat on a lake in Switzerland, it's hard to be exasperated and frustrated at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that seems like that's a pretty good deal.
Oh yeah, that was about releasing and having some fun at that point. So I was there doing that Skona Jazz Festival, and it was my day off, and my manager rented a boat, and we all got on the boat and just rode around on the lake, and Nick Mercadell, who's my producer, was on the boat, and I was like, Nick, I got this melody in my head. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna sing it in my phone, and that way, we can get back to it later. He was like, all right. And I sang the hook, Good Times. And then from there, I started building the song once I got home. So.
And it's such a fun song. I mean,
Yeah.
it's it's got a little bit of the kind of funk feel to it, which you guys do a little bit of as well. But again, it's one of those songs that sounds classic and contemporary all at once. Talk a little bit about Up. That was the first single, which ended up on the R&B charts, I think, briefly, right? It got up there.
Yeah, number 24.
Tell me about that song. Yeah, that's great.
So that song actually came to me when I was cooking dinner, because when I went back to the voice memo, I can hear the seasoning sizzling in the skillet. Oh, that was a tongue twister. Sizzling in the skillet.
I missed it myself, yeah.
And, when you're, I'm a single girl, and I was just thinking about, when I was in a relationship, I felt this, and when we first met, the butterflies in the tummy, or the giggles, or you see the phone ringing, you get this big smile on your face, and it made me feel like I was floating, like I was going up, and that's how the song came to be. So when I started writing, I started talking about things, 747, hot air balloons in the clouds, anything that would make you feel light and airy and good. So that's how it all came about.
So, in a way, thematically related to the movie Up, I guess. I mean, kind of.
Yeah.
Up in the balloon.
Yeah.
Not that you were thinking of that.
No,
but,
but yeah.
But it works. It works. It works. Let's talk about a couple of other tunes on the record. Chocolate Sunshine. Love the title. Tell me about that one.
So Chocolate Sunshine really came about as words of encouragement to myself. And sometimes on Instagram, when I would post a picture of myself, I would say Chocolate Sunshine. And Cyril Neville was like, you should write a song about that. And I was like, okay, but nothing ever really settled in until I needed to encourage myself one day. And that's how it all came about. Just like, you are chocolate sunshine, beauty all around.
So yeah, I mean, and you, I think like a lot of singers, I mean, you write songs as much for yourself as anybody else. Is that safe to say? Yeah,
it's more therapy and cathartic for us as songwriters. Most times it's always for yourself first, and then it relates to other people. People relate to it. Very seldom I write, if you give me a track, I can just write to it. I'm more of an emotional writer. I have to connect to something or really understand what's happening in order for me to pen it.
And to make it happen, right.
Yeah.
It's got to be something that when you sing it, you can bring some sort of authenticity.
Yeah, I can tell the story.
To the story, that's right. Pete's tune.
So, Pete's tune came about, Pete Morano.
Pete Morano, guitar player and trombone shorty in Orleans Avenue. Yep.
Yes. He, on Instagram, he said, man, I had this line come to me, guys, and what else can y'all do with it? Can you add to it? And the first line was, early this morning, watched the train roll by. And a lot of people went the country and western route. They started writing about things of that nature. But when I read the line, I envisioned a woman sitting on the porch in the country, sipping a cup of tea, and there's a field, maybe a wheat field or something, and in the distance there's a train going by, and she's on the porch thinking about the beautiful night she had with her mate the night before. And so that's how I ended up writing. That's what I envisioned, and I just started writing to what I envisioned. And then I also gleaned from, all of my girlfriends are married. I'm the single one in the group, right? But they're good marriages, and I got to glean a little bit from conversations or when we talk and confidentially about things, and pin that into the song as well. And so that's how Pete's tune came about.
No, it's another great song. If you're just tuning in, my guest today is Erica Falls, singer who has a great new album out called Emotions. So the title, it could have been Range of Emotions, I guess, because I mean you're kind of running the gamut here from elation to frustration and exasperation. Was it all really inspired by that kind of COVID time and coming out of it? I mean, was that, or did some of the stuff go back even further?
That actually, most of it came out during the COVID time.
Yeah.
Especially when you listen to Over It and Take Me Away, those two things, we were really in the thick of it at that moment. And even though those songs have like exasperation and frustration, within it also love was happening. You know, because people really had to spend time together, and either they learned that they really liked each other or they really didn't. And so I chose the other side of people rediscovering each other in relationships, and so that's how Pete's Tune and Up, things of that nature came about. But then, you know, we have to have some fun. So that's how Good Times came about. Just wanting to dance, let's get down tonight, all of that. It just comes from really wanting to dance and have some fun and release and forget about what's happening in the world. Yeah.
Sometimes you wear your high heels, sometimes you wear the bedroom slippers.
There you go.
I mean, you know, you gotta wear them both.
Yes.
At that Dewdrop show the other night, you talked toward the end about how tough it can be to be an independent artist, as you are. So, yeah, I mean, just talk about that. I mean, it is very hard, and I, as I talk to other musicians, it doesn't seem like it's getting any easier necessarily, especially post-COVID. It seems a little harder sometimes to even get people to come out to shows, maybe a little bit. I mean, what's been your experience? What have been the biggest challenges you faced as an independent artist, and kind of what is the plan going forward to maybe overcome some of those? Well,
the biggest challenges I've faced is when you're the one-stop shop, like the finances of it all, hiring a publicist and, you know, having to pay the booking agent and taking care of your team and things of that nature. You realize it can be very expensive, and it makes it hard to tour because budgets aren't the same anymore. So you have to choose something that makes sense to where you can end up break even and not end up in the hole. And, you know, people only see what we put out, the perception.
Right.
You know, when you're all glammed up and you're on stage or taking the pictures, but they don't see you in the trenches, you know, hustling on a side gig to fund what's happening. You know, I have no shame to say I was doing DoorDash so I could make sure I paid my publicist because I believed in the bigger vision. So it's not easy, but if you really believe in what you're doing, it pays off in the end. It's worth it. Going forward, it's a little tricky. Because the pandemic really kind of turned the music industry on its ear.
Yep.
It is kind of hard to pull people out, you know, to get them out to shows. But the good thing is when you have fans and true music lovers, they'll come out and support you anyway. But yeah, it's not an easy task. This is why we appreciate when people do come out, when they buy a ticket, when they buy the merch. You know, all of that is so important to help us view what we want and to move forward. Yeah.
Yeah, you had a nice crowd at the Dewdrop the other night, and you know, people seemed very appreciative of what you were doing. I mean, they were hooting and hollering, and again, it felt like it must have felt back in the day at the Dewdrop. You know, if only every show could be that easy.
Right. You know? That would be fantastic.
But now, you know, and a lot of artists have talked about that. I mean, specifically, I remember talking to Samantha Fish about how, you know, it is really a 24/7 job, like to be an independent artist and to make it all work. I mean, you have to constantly be figuring out what's the next step, where is the money going to come from for this, and try and be creative on top of that too, because it's two different halves of the brain. You know, you got to be a business person on one side,
yes,
but then you've also got to like be inspired and write some tunes. You know? So. Would you, I mean, your focus is now on you and your career and your projects. I mean, would you ever go back and collaborate with another artist again like you did with Galactic at that point? I mean, is that something you would think about?
I would. It would have to be something that I really liked, something that I really enjoyed doing, not just for the sake of it, but I would, because I love collaborating with people. That's how you learn more. You see music in a different light through someone else's eyes, so I love a good collaboration. So yeah, I would be down for it.
Meanwhile, the musicians that I saw you playing with the other night and the musicians on the record, it seems like you found a group of people that are very in tune with your vision and how you want the sound to be. Did you explain to them ahead of time, like when you're making the record, I want this to feel so-and-so, so-and-so, or did you kind of just give them a general sketch and let them go in and do their thing?
Well, the good thing is most of them have been with me for 10 plus years, so they know me and they've seen me grow and evolve. And so my producer, Nick Mercadal, I go to him and I say, hey, Nick, this is what I hear in my head, and this is a house it lives in. So I'll send maybe about 2 or 3 tunes. And I say, it lives in this house. I don't want to mimic it, but this is the idea. So it gives us some sort of bones or structure to build upon. And then from there, we just, you know, I send it to Donald. Hey, Donald, what do you feel? Donald Ramsey. Jersey, phenomenal bass player. We'll have Marcus come in, or have Jason Hyde, who are my keyboard players, or either have Chris Atkins or Danny Abel. They'll come in, and this is what we're feeling, this is the vibe, until we kind of get what we want, and then we all put it together, and it works out.
So you don't necessarily live in that same house, but you want to be on the same block of things you sound like. It's like
exactly.
I want to be, that same kind of vibe.
Yeah.
Is the plan to try and go on the road then at some point this year? What's ahead in 2024?
We're working on some stuff. Right now we're getting ready to be in the thick of it with festival season here, which I'm grateful to be a part of. But we're working on some things that's going to be happening later on in the year. Where fingers crossed we can get our way to Europe, because the music is getting a lot of play on that side of the pond as well. So. Fingers crossed, with great budgets, hopefully we can make it all happen.
All right, we've just got a couple minutes left here, but as you kind of look back at this point in your career, thinking back to when you first made the decision to be a singer back in the day, if you could go back in time, would you tell that young girl, hey, look, it's going to be all right, it's going to be hard? What would be the message to her? To young Erica, to send that letter that you wrote to Michael Jackson asking him if he thought you can sing with a little cassette tape. Send it, girl, because you have the gift. That's what I would say to her. Wait, you wrote a letter to Michael Jackson?
I wrote a letter to Michael Jackson with a cassette recording of me singing into it, and asking him if he thought I can sing and if I had a good voice. And that was going to be my push to keep going. I never sent it. I put it in a drawer and closed the drawer, but I did keep on, and I followed with the dream. But I would have sent that cassette tape back in the day.
Because, who knows what could have happened?
Right.
Oh my gosh, why didn't you send it, you think?
I was afraid. The introvert took over. So I became a little shy about it.
Even to put it in the mail?
Even to put it in the mail.
Oh my gosh. Did you have Michael Jackson's address? Where are you going to send it?
Right On Magazine had some sort of address. I don't know if it was a proper address, but I was going to send it there.
Oh
yes.
My gosh. Who knows what could have happened had young introverted Erica sent that letter to Michael Jackson all those years ago. Oh my gosh. Well, even despite that fact, you've made a very good record. You should be really proud of it. The band you have right now is really good. It's a great show.
Thank you.
I really wish you continued success at the festival season and beyond with it.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you for being a guest with me today.
Likewise.
All right, this has been Erica Falls. Check out her new record, Emotions. Go see her at festivals and at clubs. I am Keith Spera. I will see you next time on Let's Talk.
Let's Talk with Keith Spera is underwritten by the New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Foundation.